Welcome back to Keeping BZ. We are doing Gotham Knights this time around, of which I am showing Zach. Gotham Knights came out in 2022. It was very quickly forgotten after its release, after a bunch of videos called it mid, and then a more viral video compared its visuals to that of Batman Arkham Knight and showed how kind of understated Gotham Knights looked by comparison, wasn't as stylized, didn't have as many particle effects and rain. And so people were like, wow, this game must have had no effort put into it. So they kind of cast it away and it was forgotten about. Why am I suddenly playing Gotham Knights now? It's generally just out of personal interest. I've already played all the Batman Arkham games. One of my favorite Batman Arkham games is actually Arkham Origins, of which this is the same developer. So, you know, Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Knight, that's all Rocksteady. This was, I believe, WB Games, Warner Brother Games, Montreal. And their two biggest credits are Arkham Origins and this game. Just two Warner Brothers property games under the Batman icon. So I was always interested to see how this turned out and what actually became of it, and if it really was all that bad as people were saying. So as of last night, I have beaten this game. I have put 40 hours into it. Was my final time when I finally finished off. No, I did not expect the game to last that long, but to be fair, a lot of that was because I spent a decent amount of time doing the optional crimes in the open world and going downtown and doing everything else and just fooling around because I was actually having fun with the battle system and the customization and all the different costume types and the fact that you can play as 4 different playable characters that all have their own special moves. I like Gotham Knights. I really appreciate what it's going for. I think the characterization is a large part of what kept me playing because both the writing of the main cast, their chemistry with each other, the time the game takes to actually establish the relationships and develop them, and the voice actors they chose for everybody really do click well. So Zach, if you don't know anything about this game, essentially Batman has been murdered. We see at the beginning of the game who did it and why in a very long cutscene. And then it basically falls down to Dick Grayson, the original Robin, who now goes under the identity of Nightwing. You have Tim Drake, the new Robin. And you have Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, Commissioner Gordon's daughter. And then you have Jason Todd, who now goes under the identity of the Red Hood. Jason Todd was originally murdered by the Joker when he was a Robin. And he was later brought back through the nature of what's called a Lazarus Pit, which is the same thing that brought back the Batman villain Ra's al Ghul. So Jason struggles with bouts of aggression and mental like basically a lot of memory loss because of being brought back to life in that way. But he's coming back around to being part of the family again. And so yeah, it's just the game focuses on the dynamics between that cast. Here we have them in their lair called the Belfry, which is kind of like in this big, I believe, kind of like clock tower overlooking the city. Because the Batcave is gone. Wayne Manor collapsed into dust after Bruce Wayne's Batman's death. And so there's no Batcave, there's nothing. They got to find their own place. So this is their place overlooking Gotham City. So similar to when we did the PS1 Spider-Man game, I assume Zach probably has some experience with Batman, but not a lot. So I'll let him kind of talk a bit about his impressions of Batman and what, you know, his impressions he is of, like, what did you hear about Gotham Knights too? Like, do you know anything about this game?
I know pretty much everybody hated it immediately. I did know the Batman gets murdered because that's a thing that makes everybody mad whenever you murder him. It immediately makes me think of spoilers, I guess, but I think everybody knows at this point. Unless you're not chronically online, which I wish I was less of, but Joel dies in the beginning of The Last of Us 2, and that pissed everyone off.
Right.
But yeah, I know Batman gets murdered at the beginning. I know the 4 characters. I was shocked to see Red Hood. because I've seen the animated movie Under the Red Hood, which is actually a really good movie. I did quite enjoy that.
Yeah.
But I could never tell if Red Hood was a straight up villain or if he was supposed to be an anti-hero. Because the only thing I've ever seen of Red Hood is some interactions in Injustice 2 and the Under the Red Hood, but other than that, like I pretty much know next to nothing about Batman. I've played a decent amount of Batman games. I've seen some Batman movies. I still need to see the Batman, but I see that 3-hour runtime, and I'm just like, one day. I've seen The Dark Knight, but I saw it when I was 16, so it's been quite a long time. I've seen the original Batman 1989 movie. Now I remember enjoying that one at the time. I saw Batman Returns, and I hate that movie. Batman Forever, I'm probably going to make a lot of Batman fans mad by saying this. I unironically like Batman Forever. Is it good? Not really. But I honestly get quite a lot of enjoyment out of Batman Forever. Although, yes, Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face is really, really bad, and I don't even need to know that much about Two-Face to know that it's a bad performance. And Jim Carrey Riddler depends on if you like Jim Carrey. I like Jim Carrey, so I like the Jim Carrey Riddler, but I can also see him being a not great interpretation of the Riddler. But I think it's easier for me to like it because I don't know much about Batman. So if it's a bad version of Riddler, I couldn't tell you.
Right. No, and I pretty much kind of side with Zach in a lot of ways that I just never really jived well with Batman Returns. That was a movie where visually it's definitely Tim Burton's best looking Batman movie with the best special effects of the two films. But in terms of the script is what kills Batman Returns. The movie goes off the rails into being essentially Tim Burton is just given full creative control, which in a lot of cases is actually not usually a good thing. I love Ed Wood. I like some of his other work, but when he is asked to do full creative control instead of, just focusing on the visuals, you usually get very poor products in terms of script writing and character. Batman Forever, yeah, it's not very good, but it still overall to me has elements I can latch onto more than Returns in terms of having characters. I like the dynamic between Batman and Robin in that film and how it grows throughout the story to the point where they do form a bit of a team by the end of the film, and as they begin to understand each other's plights, Bruce knowing, Dick's issues with wanting revenge and him wanting revenge, because Bruce himself also wanted revenge for the death of his parents. Like they honestly handled all of that stuff pretty good. I like all that stuff. Obviously Batman and Robin is terrible. And that doesn't really need to even be a discussion. Zach, I've thought about it back and forth. Batman and Robin or Batman Returns?
I hate Batman and Robin more. Batman Returns made me laugh a few times. Yeah. There's just some absolute nonsense going on in Batman Returns. But Batman and Robin, that movie to me is overstimulating. The sets are very colorful, but I kind of like that. But in Batman and Robin's case, I don't know, it gives me a headache. The movie is just too much energy all the time. Whereas I feel like Forever had a better balance of being very cartoony and colorful, but then when he went back to Bruce Wayne, it was a bit more grounded. I mean, his relationship with, is it Vicky Vale, or was that the girl from the first movie? I'm trying to remember the name of the love interest in the third film.
Oh, I think that, well, actually, no, that wasn't Vicky Vale. I forget her name. She was also, she was like a psychiatrist, psychologist, like criminal psychologist lady or something. Because remember, she was like examining Batman, and she was examining Bruce Wayne, and she was fascinated by Batman and all this kind of stuff. I forget what her whole deal was, but yeah, all that stuff was pretty bad in Forever.
Is it a horribly written romance? Yes. But
Yes.
It's kind of so horribly written. They're both trying so hard to flirt and doing such a bad job of it that it kind of comes back around to me being interested in their relationship.
Yes. I guess I should talk a little bit about what's going on here. So, yeah, if you're wondering why Nightwing is wearing a cowboy hat, these costumes I unlocked by reading a tie-in comic book to the game called Batman Gotham Knights: The Gilded Age, which is it's set between both modern times and then it'll switch back to the 1800s to show like how the two cases connect. And so the costumes that you unlock are basically outfits of what these characters would look like if they designed their costumes in the 1800s. With leather and whips and all these kinds of things that honestly, they look kind of neat. I like what they do with a lot of the designs of them. But what's going on in the story is that we are currently hot on the tail of what is called the Court of Owls. First introduced in the New 52 run of Batman, written by Scott Snyder. Who, if you don't know what the Court of Owls is, Zach, they're basically like, think Gotham Illuminati. They're like, they're the secret society that's actually controlled Gotham for centuries, but nobody has known that they really exist or what they've been up to. And even Batman never knew of their existence. But now these characters are just suddenly uncovering them. So Penguin there was basically knifed to a wall by the Court of Owls because of basically him giving too much information away to the superheroes. And Robin has now been, Nightwing has now been knocked out and kidnapped and thrown into what is called the Court of Owls maze, where they basically try to drive you insane with hallucinations and this endless maze until you die. And this is what Batman goes through in the original Court of Owls comic, where when he gets to the end of the maze, what he sees at the end of the maze is like a big wall of picture frames of all the people who died in the maze and different stages of them growing beards and losing their minds as they passed and died. The Court of Owls are pretty vicious. They don't have superpowers. They're just incredibly, some of them don't have superpowers, but though they're just, they know Gotham inside and out because they've always been there pulling the strings from the background. And they have an owl theme, and they do a whole thing in the comic where it's like, they're owls, and owls are natural predators, Zach, of bats. So they try to tie in the nature of owls as a creature to how they operate and how they contrast to bats and how they can defeat the Batman. Ow. So that's intentional. They want you to get hit there, basically giving you an idea of just how the owls are kind of screwing with you and sending you back.
Wait, I'm back here? That's impossible.
So this game, Zach, actually operates on an interesting system. It's not like the Arkham games where you just are dunked into the open world city and do the entire game in one shot. You have a day and night system where by the day you saw at the beginning of this video, me just kind of walking around their kind of lit up base, customizing my costumes and stuff. You can do all that in your lab during the day, and then you go out night to do what's called your patrol, where you go out and you do the random crimes you find in the open world, as well as doing the story missions. And that's where you choose what character you play as before you go out into the city. So it's interesting because it means that you can only do... It basically is a way of trying to pull back from you being too overwhelmed by open world stuff to do, because there's only a certain amount of open world stuff that will be available each night that you patrol. And there will only be a certain amount of story stuff you can do when you're patrolling before you have to go back to your base to either change characters or continue story that you need the other characters around to progress. How do you feel about those changes as comparison to just being in the open world at all times doing everything like in the Arkham games?
I'm surprised that's not a thing that happens more in superhero games, where you have a secret alias part. I'm surprised there isn't a superhero game that's really tried a more Persona approach, although I guess you just described it here. But like you could do some things as the secret alias, whether it's investigating or getting power-ups or social link equivalents or whatever, and then, like you said, doing your patrols at night. Honestly, I can kind of see a Buffy game doing that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and they kind of do that in the Xbox exclusive Buffy game. But only in the sense that the day segments are just kind of you going to the library at the high school and just like chatting up like Giles and Xander and everybody just to get your exposition dumps, and then at night you go and do the levels. But I could see you going even higher into like during the day picking out Buffy's equipment for the night. Or just having other like character stuff you can do when she's doing like even like make her cheerleading or whatever she's doing during the day part of like gameplay stuff that ties into the nighttime stuff, as Buffy needs to like choose what side of her life to focus on that affects the other. So yeah, now we're getting into like what it feels like every goddamn superhero game has this, you know, where you got the hallucination section where you're seeing things that aren't really there. Like we just had like a blown out bat signal. But here, to me, it makes a lot more sense because this hallucination stuff ties into the Court of Owls whole thing. They like to screw with your mind and, you know, make you either join them or die. So yeah, there's Bruce Wayne's coffin and the grave he was put in.
That is not okay.
What's really ambitious about this game is that depending on what character you play as, it changes what dialogue is said during cutscenes and how enemies react to the character, because they'll all have different histories with that character. So imagine like Arkham Asylum or the Arkham games, but every single character, but you have multiple different characters you can play as, and it changes the dialogue in every cutscene based on who you're playing as.
I was actually going to make a joke earlier. If the Red Hood finds the Penguin there, does he just shoot him in the face and move on?
Crap.
Possibly. Either that, or well, at the beginning of this, well, no, he probably just pulls him down or whatever because he knows what's the right thing to do. Like Red Hood's sometimes a villain and sometimes he's like a more of an anti-hero kind of vibe. This game, we've reached the point where he is like identifying himself as a hero. He still uses guns, but they are like rubber bullets.
Yeah, okay.
And as you might have noticed, I've been switching around costumes constantly during this section just to show off some of the different suits you get. So this is called the Night Watch outfit, which is designed by classic Batman artist Jim Lee. So it gives, you know, a very classic vibe of what like the general Nightwing look is. It's more stylized.
Is this thing broken?
Now we got a little puzzle, and there's actually a surprising amount of puzzles in Gotham Knights to solve, especially connected to the Court of Owls.
Because I didn't mention it earlier, I should point out that I did play through and beat Arkham City and Origins. Why not Asylum? I owned a copy of Asylum. I played it, got to the Poison Ivy boss fight, and then it kept crashing there. So I unfortunately never got to finish Asylum.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because Asylum is a great game. But I'd be curious to hear if Zach lines up with most people where they say City is the better game. Over Asylum, but I know some people that do prefer Asylum just because it's not an open world game. It is like a more close, like connected, not linear per se, but just a more connected, smaller environment you're exploring instead of open world City Go. But it depends on the person, and also I do think there are things that, like just gameplay wise, that are better executed in City. I do think I like some of the story stuff in Asylum more though. Because of just the great location of Arkham Asylum itself.
The air's clear now. They must have pumped that gas into every room.
From what I can remember, that even though I didn't get to finish Asylum, I do remember really preferring City over Asylum. I think it just made a lot of gameplay improvements, and I did have fun exploring the city. And I do also have to mention that this was back when open world games weren't as prevalent as they are today.
Right.
I do still enjoy open world games, although I definitely look for them less often. Because they used to be a cool idea, but not anymore. Now it's just like, oh good, it's... And I feel like open world being the new thing that every game wants to do is not a great decision for a lot of reasons. And I think one of the biggest ones is, like, we've always pretty much had a genre that was always the most dominating. We used to have so many mascot platformers. Third-person shooters / first-person shooters used to be the big things. But I think it's weird that it's open-world games now, because at least with mascot platformers, especially back in the NES, SNES days, and N64, they weren't really long. You could probably beat most of them in less than 10 hours, if they were even 6 hours or anything like that. So if there's a bunch of mascot platformers to play, ignoring the fact that most of them are bad, but if there's a bunch of mascot platformers to play, if you wanted to play as many as possible, there wouldn't be that... It wouldn't take that much time. Third-person shooters and first-person shooters, a lot of them kind of blend together. And I would assume they have generally longer campaigns. It probably depends on the game. But same with that, you could probably play a decent amount of first-person shooters and third-person shooters. But open-world games generally tend to be massive and take a lot of dedication. Especially when they try throwing in live service to the mix. Like I think the biggest problem with all these open world and especially live service beyond, you know, the general, beyond the scummy practices, is that nobody has infinite time and infinite money to play everything. You can't just say, oh, this one open world game is doing good, and then make another one of the hundreds of open world games. Because people are just eventually going to have to pick a side. You know, it's kind of why Concord failed for a bajillion reasons. But one of the biggest ones is it wanted to be Overwatch, but people already had Overwatch. People were already spending all of their time on Overwatch. And I feel like you're only gonna take over on Overwatch if people get sick of Overwatch. Which it seemed like was gonna happen. But I think those people went to Marvel Rivals because that game's free.
Yep. That was the other death of Concord, was that it was a product you had to pay for, and everybody just looked at all the other options on the market that are free to play. And even if Concord had changed itself to be free to play, it would have been probably too late anyway, just because it just wasn't an appealing product. Like, it's not even necessarily that it was bad. Most people that I've talked to that played Concord said, no, it was like a totally decently designed third-person, like, multiplayer game, multiplayer versus shooter thing. It was just that it's falling into an oversaturated market. Like, it doesn't... Its existence just doesn't... It's just going to be buried under everything else. And that was why it failed the way it did. And from what you've... I don't know if you were the one that told me this specifically, Zach, but yeah, Gotham Knights apparently suffered from some microtransaction issues on launch, as well as technical issues because of the game's like crafting system to make your different suits, I think, because you need all these different materials to do it. And when I played the game, I had already a whole bunch of materials, and I was able to always make things throughout the entire game without ever having to worry about being low on materials. So I imagine that was probably something they either patched in later or added to over time to make all that stuff not matter anymore instead of having to grind. But I imagine probably it was a grind much earlier on in development and when this game first came out. Because now it's like fairly smooth just playing through the entire thing. If you want a suit, you just get it. You don't have to worry about grinding for something.
Maybe that's a way out.
Yeah, I can't 100% say it had microtransactions, but I'm pretty sure I heard this game was a total grind when it first came out. And I wonder if something like that, plus being an open world game that was kind of like Arkham, but it wasn't quite Arkham. Everybody wanted a new Arkham game, and this wasn't the new Arkham game they wanted.
Right. Because this game isn't an Arkham game. It does not play like an Arkham game. has similarities in terms of, you're constantly using your grappling hook, and you're always fighting large groups of enemies, and you're flying around the open world trying to get to your next objectives, and customizing your characters to a skill tree and all that. But like I said, it has that day and night system that pulls back on the traditional open world elements. It has a combat system that isn't based around, it doesn't have the flow of the Arkham combat. It's not based around building up a combo meter to do takedowns. Instead, it's based around, you do attacks. Basically, you have an attack button that you hit it to attack and hit it multiple times to do combos. You hold it down to do a heavy attack, which you can do at any point during a combo. You have a button to hit to throw your projectile weapons, which are how you tack on elemental damage, be it fire or ice or whatever, to enemies that you can use. But it's also a way of stunning certain types of enemies that dodge out of the way of stuff. It's mainly about... it still is like a reactive thing like Spider-Man or Batman, where enemies will take a swing at you, and if they have a circle around their fist, that means that you're going to dodge this, but there's going to be another attack coming. So you dodge that, and then if there's a more like an exclamation mark around their fist, that means if you dodge this, you get that's going to be the end of their combo. And if you dodge that, you'll get basically a perfect dodge, which ups some of your momentum meter to do special attacks, as well as gives you a chance to do what's called a perfect attack, which is where you do a dodge at the last second, then hit the attack button, and you can sock an enemy into the air to do a bunch of damage. But yes, like Batman, it also has a lot of stealth, which is optional, but I find it pretty satisfying. And I think a lot of that just goes down to the game's animation work. Zach's probably seen a number of them as we've watched some of this footage of me taking down enemies, but the takedowns, both stealth and in terms of ambush attacks, which are more like the loud attacks you do to enemies, are pretty satisfying to watch, because they do a lot of really harsh moves to the enemies, and then they go slow-mo right before they deliver the final blow. And I think the animators and sound designers successfully conveyed the strength of that impact in a way that feels satisfying. I played 40 hours of this game, and I never got tired of the combat system. I was always up for it. And as the game gets harder and you meet enemies with all different kinds of elemental status effects they can put on you, or ones that have different kinds of blocks or shields that you can only break past if you're doing you have to do a heavy attack to block to destroy their shield, or do a heavy ranged attack to throw a bunch of projectiles at them to stop them from moving all over the place if they're dodging you a lot. Just that kind of stuff keeps the pace going. And I honestly find it a little less stressful than in a way that I like over the Arkham games, because it means that I'm not breaking my combo meter if I screw part of it up. I just need to get back into the action and deal what I need to deal. And you're not going to lose such and such amount of XP because you didn't get the highest combo. No, I really appreciate a lot of it. It's a little more laid back and slower paced as a project, which is probably part of why people weren't as into it. But for me, I kind of dug that. I was worried at first that the slow pacing was going to throw me off, but it also meant, kind of like Zach implied earlier, that not a lot of open world games do that whole day and night system where you don't have to do everything in one go. You do as much as the game allows you to, or you don't even have to do all of it, and then you go back to your base to plan, and then the next night new stuff will be available. And in fact, Zach, part of the way that you unlock more major crimes to do in the city is by interrogating enemies. You see this enemy here has a question mark above his head. If we interrogate him, here it's for a story mission because we're interrogating him to get information on the next bit of story. But if you just interrogate enemies in random crimes downtown, they'll give you what are called clues, and you're filling out a clue gauge, which both helps you solve and pin together mysteries to do the main story stuff, as well as basically unlocks more major crime stuff to do in the city. Because there's the small random crimes, and then there's the major ones, and the major ones are really how you unlock some of the best costumes and gear and stuff in the game. So those will be taking out a big enemy base, stopping enemies from, hurting or kidnapping like an officer or a like a random citizen. There'll be like them stealing organs, and if you take them out, then you have to get the organ back into like an ambulance in like a cold box before it rots. And there's like a story reason why they're going after organs that you find out later. Because we're like in a Court of Owl's base right now, where we see they've been experimenting on people and turning them into what are called talons, which you'll learn more about as the story goes on, which is also what the comic Court of Owls is about. Yeah, so out of everything I've discussed about the game, Zach, was there any particular questions about it at all that you were interested in as somebody that usually doesn't play these types of games?
No questions off the top of my head. I think you pretty much explained like what I would have asked anyway. Because it's very easy to hear about these games that get a whole lot of shit, or movies and shows too. I used to fall into the angry reviewer trope so hard. Like I remember when High Guardian Spice was the thing everybody was shitting on, and I got way too much into all of that. And then eventually I just grew bored of it, and one day I started watching something that it seemed like, or at the very least that I watched a review of something that they didn't like, and they were doing the whole the mean reviewer, angry reviewer shtick. And I watched it for myself, and I started realizing, oh, everybody dramatizes everything for clicks and views. And even though I admittedly still fall for it on occasion, that is something I think all of us have to keep an eye on. And I always wondered if Gotham Knights was a part of that, because if this did have microtransactions as a $60 game, then yes, I still do think that's a bad thing. But I think it is also easy to forget that even if these games do have something like microtransactions, it's usually something forced onto them from the publisher. It's not usually the developer's decision. Oh, that's cool that it seemed like he landed on the console, like the game's animation recognized he landed on something and he jumps off of it. That's neat.
Yes. Yeah. When you go down and to do like an ambush attack or a stealth move, he has very smooth animations to go down and do things. Like, animation work in this game, I feel like is underrated. Every character, of course, has bespoke animations of their own based on the character's personality and stuff. So Nightwing here is the original Robin, and as you know, Zach, Robin used to work in a circus. So a lot of his animations are acrobatic. One of his moves is that you press the circle button on the PS5 version here to do like a dodge or a roll away to get away from an enemy's attack. If you hold down the circle button with Robin, he'll do a series of acrobatic moves jumping around the area. And when you land near somebody, like am I going to do it here? No, I guess not. But if you land a certain amount of acrobatic moves, he'll just do like this pound to the ground that stuns all the enemies around him, which is pretty satisfying. And their combos feel different too. So like Robin here has Nightwing here has his two sticks that every like combo hit he does, he's hitting with both sticks at the same time. Which has a different flow, as opposed to like Batgirl uses a literal like police baton that she like attaches to her wrist, and so she does harder hits with that. Of course, Red Hood just simply beats people to death with his fists, or not to death. Of course, he's nice Red Hood now. And Robin is a bow staff, so his whole gimmicks are based around like big swinging hits with his bow, or one of his specials is twirling it around and causing like more of like an area of effect kind of move. Every character has their own kind of special moves. Dick Grayson here, it's weird. He'll like push into the ground and then unleash like a shockwave of whatever element you have attached to that melee weapon. He has little darts that he shoots out as his projectile, and he can also leap and bounce off of enemies. Like he'll jump into the air, leap off an enemy's head to damage them, and then once you upgrade it, you can then bounce off 3 other enemies' heads up to like 3 times, which is pretty satisfying. Batgirl, she can just lock onto enemies and then just execute a full like QTE beatdown. of them, where she just smashes into them and breaks through the defenses, then hops on top of their head, and then jumps downwards and smashes into their head to knock them into the ground. And then she's also the tech lady, so a lot of her, she can literally like call in her own drone to like shoot enemies and send out shockwaves that harm enemies and heal her. But the thing that's interesting about Barbara, Batgirl, is that she's also very much taking the most from Bruce than any of the other characters. So her whole thing is batarangs. She can throw like a giant wave of batarangs. And every single character in this game, when traversing the open world, has their own completely different way of traversing. So Nightwing uses what you saw earlier, kind of like this big, like kind of futuristic glider that he hangs onto like a trapeze artist through the city. Batgirl opens up her wings and flies like Batman does in the Arkham games. Robin teleports. He has like primitive teleporting technology where you hold down the teleport button and click on an area, and it can't be super far, but far enough that you can just teleport to that area. And then Red Hood channels into his Lazarus Pit powers and can just like channel it to do infinite jumps in the air. So switching between different characters isn't just looks and costumes, it is a full change in both combat and traversal. Another thing that makes this game not repetitive in comparison to other open world games, in my opinion.
Oh, okay. Actually, I do have a question. Not directly related to Gotham Knights, but pretty close. Gotham Knights versus, what was it, Square Enix's Avengers? Which one's better?
Oh, Lord.
Because those are both controversial superhero games.
Yes, I've beaten like the main first story mode of Marvel's Avengers, but I haven't played like all the other expansion story campaigns that they've added to the game after the fact. Yeah, Zach, Gotham Knights is easily the better game. You want to talk about issues with grinding? I played Avengers like a couple years or a year or two after its launch, after it had been patched up and a lot of the grinding stuff had been toned down in the game. It still was incredibly grindy. Levels took forever. And it's like a game where you're playing as the goddamn Incredible Hulk and he still feels like he's hitting thugs like a normal, like lower powered superhero. Like, I'm sorry, no. They have to make it that way, Zach, because, it's they have to make it so you have to level up and grind for gear and equipment and unlockables and equipables like it's an action RPG. I'm playing as the Hulk. If I punch somebody, they should either disintegrate or go through a goddamn wall. That's the problem here. That's why games like superhero open world games in like the 2000s worked so well, because they didn't have all of these like RPG restrictions to be planned as like microtransaction live service games. In the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction, you punch somebody and they slam into a building and send debris everywhere, because that's how the Hulk is supposed to work. He doesn't control like Spider-Man. And like they tried to do some of that stuff in Marvel's Avengers with having, here's Spider-Man and he can do kind of a web swing, but because he's designed in environments that are designed for all these other characters, he has to still play kind of similarly. It's just, it's a thing where that game has too many damn characters and they all have to be, restricted to some level to make them make sense. In Gotham Knights, no, like you're playing as characters that were none of them actually technically have real level like superhero superpowers. They are essentially just people that are super duper in shape, that are just able to do and have access to incredible near futuristic level technology. So that's kind of why it doesn't really hurt that much in Gotham Knights, because these characters are already on a similar power level where they don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And plus, like I said, they've nullified the grinding and microtransaction stuff in this game to the point where it's no longer an issue. Like, you don't even think about it anymore. So yes, I did like the story in Marvel's Avengers in the main campaign, where you play as Kamala Khan, aka Miss Marvel, and like live through the Avengers through her perspective as the Avengers split up and have to be brought back together again in a way that honestly felt quite natural and not as cliche as that setup sounds. I liked all that story stuff, but I like Gotham Knights more because it's far more open-ended and better designed as a game. The gameplay mechanics are simply better. Marvel's Avengers is deeply linear by comparison. Yes, once you get into the post-game content, you can kind of hit missions in any area you want. But ultimately, to me, it's far more satisfying in a game where I don't feel like other characters are truncated because there's too many playable characters and they have to limit things. Here, it's a nice... It's a very comfortable setting of I only can do this amount of stuff this night, so I'll hit this thing and this thing because they're the most important things on my schedule, and then maybe I could do this other stuff like a different night when I switch to a different character. And like the story stuff, to me, the ambition of being able to change cutscenes based on who you're playing as, like being able to like have, like Penguin will respond differently to Robin than he does to like Red Hood. Like he wouldn't even like these villains would sort of know who all these characters are, but they don't know, they're not as familiar with some as others. So they'll reference certain things. Like some of the villains or some of the characters know that Batgirl is Commissioner Gordon's daughter. So they'll kind of taunt her with that kind of stuff, or taunt her with the fact her father died, or like all that kind of stuff is like details that show the care the writers had for these characters and understanding how to make them play off of each other. And it still impresses me that they put that much effort into changing all the cutscenes up based on who you're playing as. Yeah, also, yes, you do get multiple different costumes for the Avengers and Marvel's Avengers. You have to grind the shit out of that to get those. It's ridiculous. Here in Gotham Knights, you have to grind to some level. Like, you do have to work your way up to fighting enemy types that would give you the materials to unlock that specific kind of outfit. But even from the get-go, you can craft a number of different costumes already. And on top of this, Zach, you're not just equipping these costumes, they are also able to be customized. Look, I can change the cowl. I can change the bat symbol on the outfit. I can change the gloves. I can change the boots. I can even change what's called the colorway, where I can go in and change what color the suit is or what kind of look I want it to have. And yes, you unlock more of these as you play through the game, but even starting out, there's a decent amount of customization already in a way that you wouldn't get in a game like Marvel's Avengers. So while at this point, it feels like I'm a broken record belaboring the opinion that is obvious, it's true. Gotham Knights is easily a better game than Marvel's Avengers ever was.
Yeah, it is nice that they took out most of the grinding. I believe WB Games seemed to do that because I believe I'd have to play it to make sure. Shadow of War. What's it called? Tales of Middle Earth, Shadow of War. Is it something like that?
Yeah. Yes.
But, the sequel to Shadow of Mordor. Shadow of War also was pretty controversial when it came out because that had, I believe, microtransactions because you needed to pay to get some of the gear that you could just get by playing the game in Shadow of Mordor. But from what I remember when I played a couple of minutes of Shadow of War, I think there's even a thing at the beginning that says, no, we took this stuff out. Which, I wonder how many games consistently do that. Especially when,
do those games deserve that second chance after that stuff is removed?
Because Shadow of Mordor, I think, is a very, very good game. It's another open world game. It kind of plays Assassin's Creed, Arkham City-ish, but, with more of a Lord of the Rings. Which Lord of the Rings is another thing that I don't know much of. I don't know much about anything. But look, if it has a card game, I'll learn more about it.
Of course.
There are some Marvel heroes I've only heard of because of Marvel Snap, but
I mean, didn't you play speaking of, this is a DC game. Didn't you tell me you played like a DC mobile card game or something along those lines that did have that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I played DC Dual Force, which wanted to be a competitor to Marvel Snap and failed super hard, which is kind of a shame. I thought it was a pretty good game. Plus, they were really going to push single-player content, which a card game hasn't really done for a while. Well, unless it was a roguelike deck builder, of course. But in terms of card games with PvP elements, most of them don't really focus on single player much anymore. And DC Dual Force was going to do something cool where you were going to be able to play levels based on the comics, and they were going to let you like unlock some comic pages that you could read, and then those would give you challenges based on what happens in the story of those comics.
Perfect as usual.
But unfortunately, I don't think DC Dual Force lasted long enough to do any of that, because it was one of those games where you had to pay before you were allowed to play. And if Artifact taught us anything, if Concord also taught us anything, although DC Dual Force was not nearly as expensive as Concord, I think DC Dual Force was 10 or 15. But if you want people to get into something, a lot of times now, you gotta make it free to play.
Right. I've just been showing off here some of the other types of missions you do in this game. Like, there are just, ring-type missions of you showing off that you've learned how to master the physics and controls of both the bat cycle and whatever type of traversal that particular character has. Every single character has their own particular setups for the traversal. And if you're able to complete these, you get some bonuses, as well as you're able to get another Keller that you can customize the bat cycle or other kinds of your equipment with. Just like something very optional and extra that I just sort of appreciate, because I actually do find these pretty decently fun, because these actually control pretty well. They don't feel as frustrating as you'd expect. The bat cycle can control a bit like a tank with how heavy it is, but as long as you're hitting both the brake and gas at the same time as you turn, you're able to kind of keep your momentum up in a way that I think feels satisfying. So no Batmobile in this game. The Batmobile was totaled when the Batcave blew up at the beginning.
Okay, yeah, that was one thing that kind of... It sounds a little petty, but that was kind of one thing that scared me off from Arkham Knight, is I wasn't sure if I was going to like the more emphasis on the Batmobile. And whenever vehicles come into play, I don't entirely hate vehicle sections, but when I play an Arkham game, I want to be Batman. I want to glide around as Batman. I don't want to have to be forced into a car. And I'm sure the Batmobile controls well and does some cool things. But I don't know.
It does.
I just want to punch people in Arkham. I want to focus on my combo.
Ooh, I'm going to show off something pretty cool here. We also have crime scene investigations in this game.
Better check this out.
So you scan the environment, look for clues, and you have to piece together what clues connect and which one tells you who killed this person and where they're located. There's a decent amount of variety in this game. And yeah, Zach, now, the Batmobile in Arkham Knight feels amazing to control. Especially when it is just cruising down the city. The thing is just ripping apart concrete and buildings like nuts while you're driving around. It is just, there's tons of particle effects going at all times, which is ridiculous. It's partly why the Switch version of the game crashes so much, because of the damn Batmobile. And also because it wasn't very polished. The Batmobile feels great. It's just that the game puts too much emphasis on it in its attempts to try to not make the gameplay just play exactly like Arkham City and Arkham Origins. They go, okay, what's something we can do to switch this up? Okay, let's throw in the Batmobile. So they not only do they force you to drive in it, they make you sometimes solve puzzles using the Batmobile's winch to pull things, and then you also have to use the Batmobile. It turns into a tank where you have to shoot enemies in other tanks, which just feels very strange in a Batman game. I understand they're trying to make it kind of like The Dark Knight Returns, but to me, it just, there was too much of it. It just kind of felt odd. Some of it was a little frustrating. It probably would have been fine if it was just slimmed down a bit. Gotham Knights, to me, feels like it kind of understood the criticisms of the Batmobile. So the Bat Cycle is almost entirely optional. Maybe once in a while you want to use it to get to a specific location faster, but you can also do that if you get really good at grappling around and using your character's momentum and traversal. Here, no, it's just a thing you can call up if you want to drive it around. You don't have to use it. But I do miss on some level, like for example, the chases in Arkham Knights, where you're chasing after other enemies and cars, and you shoot missiles out of the Batmobile to just blow up their cars and wreck them. All that stuff, because of just the detail put into the wreckage and physics and all of that felt super satisfying in the game. There are car chase missions in Gotham Knights, but they're few and far between, and they're just, they're fine. You just have to drive up enough to catch up with them, ram into their car, and then you trigger like an animation where you take them down. Right now, what I'm doing to end the video off is exploring what's called an owl nest, one of the nests of the Court of Owls. And Zach, you might find this pretty cool. So the twist with the Court of Owls is that how have they been hiding in Gotham all this time without people noticing them? So, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, Zach, but did you know that especially in older buildings, like when we were more superstitious back in like the early 1900s and 1800s, when we were building buildings, we would actually not include the 13th floor in buildings for bad luck. Like we were so worried about bad luck that we would the elevators would skip the number 13 and go right to 14, and you would just pass by the 13th floor and not have it be an open space because they were that afraid of something happening due to superstition. So the Court of Owls secretly build their nests in Gotham City in the oldest buildings where the 13th floors are paved over. So that's where Batman finds their hideouts where they've been living for decades.
Yeah, I think I watched an entire movie. Wait. No, I think that was Room 13. There's this old horror movie that I watched for no reason. And I think in that movie they explained that there usually isn't a 13th floor. And I think it's about a guy that stays overnight on the 13th floor of a hotel and creepy things happen.
Oh, okay. That sounds cool.
But it's been a very long time. It might have not been the 13th floor itself. It might have been a room. But I do remember hearing about... yeah, we don't have a 13th floor because of superstitious reasons. But yeah, the idea of hiding in the 13th floor, that is actually pretty neat.
Yeah, and many times you'll find either like mailboxes down here where they're transferring information between each other. You'll find little, like what we see here, like look like jail cells where they're keeping like prisoners that they're either going to put into their maze or elsewhere. Just, yeah, little details like that. Like, the environments are always very nicely decorated in Gotham Knights. So, that's about it. That's Gotham Knights. I hope that I have at least shown you, even if you are not interested in playing this game now, I at least hope that some people now see this and understand that, yeah, this game was super, like, treated poorly when it really deserved more than the recognition it got. So on this beautiful lookout over the much more colorful Gotham City than comparison videos will have you believe, we're going to end it right here. Thanks for joining us for Keeping BZ, and join us next time for whatever card game or a puzzle game that Zach will have for us next time. See us then.